Most travel advice is designed to save you time, help you avoid crowds, and keep you from wasting money, and most of it is pretty sensible. But after decades of traveling around Europe, I've found that following every rule too closely can sometimes make a trip less enjoyable. Every now and then, it's worth getting completely lost, taking the most obvious tourist bus, or even knowingly overpaying for a drink. So here are 7 Europe travel rules that are worth breaking at least once. I'm Roger from priceoftravel.com, and let's get started. Rule number 1, your time is limited, so don't wander around without a plan. That's good advice most of the time, but there are a few places where following the most efficient route can make your visit much less enjoyable. Venice is the perfect example, and Prague has a similar problem to a lesser extent. In Prague, huge numbers of visitors follow the same path from the Old Town Square to the Charles Bridge and then up toward Prague Castle. It's certainly worth seeing all 3, but the streets connecting them can feel like one long tourist funnel. Venice takes this problem to another level. Nearly everyone follows the same route between the train station, the Rialto Bridge, and St. Mark's Square. There are even signs reassuring you that you're going the right way, so enormous crowds slowly shuffle through the same narrow walkways lined with souvenir shops. This is Venice at its least magical. Instead, take Rick Steves' advice and get lost on purpose. Venice's historic center is compact and surrounded by water, so you really can't stray too far, and now that everyone carries GPS, genuinely getting lost is almost impossible anyway. Turn down an alley that doesn't appear to lead anywhere, cross a bridge away from the crowd, and keep going without worrying about whether you've chosen the fastest route. The crowds can disappear surprisingly quickly. That's when you start finding quiet canals, small neighborhood squares, local shops, laundry hanging above the street, and restaurants that most day trippers walk right past. You may take twice as long to reach St. Mark's Square, but the journey becomes one of the best parts of the visit. Especially during the crowded middle of the day, the less direct route through Venice is almost always the more memorable one. Rule number 2, allow at least half a day for the large and famous museums. I'm not sure how common this was for other people, but I grew up with the idea that one reason we visit European cities is to learn about their culture and history. That meant visiting the important museums was practically compulsory, and I sometimes felt guilty that I didn't enjoy spending 4 or 6 hours looking at paintings and sculptures. When I started traveling around Europe on my own, I often spent half the day in record stores and outdoor markets instead, because those were the places that I genuinely found interesting. I eventually developed a real appreciation for museums, and by now I've visited most of the famous ones in Europe, but I've also learned that about 90 minutes is usually my sweet spot. At enormous museums like the Louvre, the British Museum, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, or the Prado in Madrid, I'll choose a few things I especially want to see, wander around for a while, and then leave when I start getting tired of the crowds or when everything begins to look the same. Admittedly, admission prices have jumped at many museums, so leaving after only 90 minutes can feel like you aren't getting your money's worth. But once I've hit the wall, another 2 hours inside costs me something even more valuable: my limited vacation time. A short museum visit can be much better than skipping it completely or staying until you're miserable. And at Britain's major national museums, where the permanent collections are free, it's even easier. You can leave whenever you like and come back another day. A museum visit shouldn't be an endurance test. Rule number 3, focus your limited time on high culture and history. That sounds admirable, but it may not produce your most enjoyable or memorable travel experiences. Sometimes you'll learn more about a place by attending a local soccer or football match, even if you aren't much of a fan yourself. I'm recording this shortly after the World Cup ended, when interest in football is unusually high. But even after that fades, visitors from outside Europe may be surprised by the passion, traditions, and local quirks on display at almost any match. For Americans, the closest equivalent may be the biggest college football programs, where support is often passed through families, you remain a fan for life, and switching teams is almost unthinkable. In Canada, the closest comparison is probably just hockey. Outside the English Premier League, tickets can be surprisingly affordable. Many stadiums are intimate enough that you feel close to the action, and they're often woven into ordinary city neighborhoods rather than isolated behind enormous parking lots. Most supporters arrive by train, tram, bus, or on foot, so the excitement begins long before kickoff. You start seeing scarves, jerseys all over the city, then join the crowds moving toward the stadium. Inside, the songs, chants, food, and sometimes wonderfully strange traditions can be just as entertaining as the match itself. I've attended a few fairly random games around Europe over the years, and every one has been an unforgettable novelty. You don't need to understand every rule or care who wins. For a couple of hours, you get to experience the city as its resident residents do, and learn something about the local culture that no museum could show you. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button because it really helps other people find these videos. Rule number 4, use day trips to maximize efficiency and avoid changing hotels. I discussed this quite a bit in my recent video ranking Europe's most famous day trips, which I'll link below. The basic idea makes perfect sense. Visit a nearby town or attraction during the day, then return to your same hotel instead of packing, checking out, and traveling with your luggage and checking in somewhere else. That works extremely well for somewhere like Toledo, which is only about 30 minutes from Madrid by high-speed train. You can see the highlights and be back in Madrid before lunch if you want. But day trips can also create a trap. Hundreds or even thousands of visitors arrive at roughly the same time, spend the same crowded hours following similar routes, and then leave together late in the afternoon. You experience the destination only when it's operating at maximum capacity. For places such as the Cinque Terre or Rotenburg ob der Tauber, spending one night can completely change the experience. Once the tour groups and day trippers leave, you get a quieter evening and the following morning with far fewer people around. That's when you can explore slowly, take photographs without fighting the crowds, and appreciate the place on its own terms, instead of being trapped behind busloads of tourists who always seem to walk slightly slower than you do. Changing hotels may be less efficient on paper, but sometimes the least crowded hours are the ones that make the destination worth visiting. Rule number 5, schedule one of Switzerland's famous scenic train journeys for maximum sightseeing. This one is obviously specific to Switzerland, but if you haven't been there yet, you should probably start planning. Switzerland packs an incredible amount of scenery into a small country, especially in the alpine regions of the south. When you begin researching a trip, you'll quickly discover famous panoramic routes such as the Bernina Express, Glacier Express, and Golden Pass. These journeys are extraordinary, and the special panoramic carriages take the experience to another level, but they may require advanced reservations and additional fees, and the full routes often leave you a long way from where you started. Depending on your itinerary, you may spend additional time and money backtracking afterward. The good news is that almost every above-ground train journey in Switzerland, outside ordinary Zurich commuter routes, is scenic enough to impress most visitors. Even the regular trains are modern, comfortable, and generally punctual, with enormous windows overlooking lakes, valleys, villages, vineyards, and snow-covered mountains. Regional trains also travel along many of the same spectacular rail lines as the famous panoramic surfaces. You may give up the special carriage and onboard commentary, but the mountains outside the window don't change. I used to receive questions about the scenic trains constantly, and my advice was usually the same. Take normal trains between the places you actually want to visit. You'll still get unbelievable views, you won't have to redesign your itinerary or backtrack, and you may save quite a bit of money as well. Rule number 6, hop-on hop-off buses and sightseeing cruises are only for amateurs and should be avoided. This one genuinely bothers me. I am a huge fan of hop-on hop-off buses, and I've taken them in at least 50 cities around the world. I'll have much more to say about them in an upcoming video. I do agree that they usually shouldn't be treated as transportation. Traffic, waiting times, and indirect routes make them an inefficient way to move between specific attractions, and almost every European city has a better public transportation system. But for seeing the major sights during your first full morning in a new city, they're often hard to beat. Ironically, my favorite strategy is to get a good seat on the open upper deck and stay there for the entire loop. I'm especially fond of the Paris tour, which I've taken many times, often with friends visiting for the first time. The full circuit currently takes about 2 hours and 15 minutes, and the scenery is excellent almost the entire way. From the upper deck, you see architectural details, monuments, and entire streetscapes that are difficult to appreciate from the sidewalk below. And while we're in Paris, the popular 1-hour Seine cruises are even better. The city's most famous buildings were designed to face the river, and from the water you glide past the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the Notre Dame, and one historic bridge after another. Take the cruise around sunset and the experience becomes magical as the sky darkens, the bridges begin to glow, and the monuments light up around you. I take that cruise almost every time I visit Paris, regardless of what more sophisticated travelers think I should be doing instead. Rule number 7, avoid touristy restaurants and cafes or you'll pay twice as much for mediocre food and drinks. This is one I struggle with myself because my default travel mode is value maximizer, which is a polite way of saying that I'm usually a cheapskate. The more you travel, the more careful you have to be about wasting money. And most of the time, avoiding restaurants on famous squares is excellent advice. You can often find better food for half the price by walking 2 blocks away. But price and quality aren't the only forms of value. Sometimes the experience itself is worth paying for. St. Mark's Square in Venice is a classic example. Its historic cafes fill the square with outdoor tables, and on many evenings there's live music beneath the stars. The drinks can cost double or triple what you'd pay around the corner, so it's easy to dismiss the entire thing as a rip-off designed for gullible tourists. I certainly wouldn't order an expensive dinner without checking the menu first, but one drink is different. You're knowingly paying extra for the music, the moonlight, and a seat in one of the most famous public spaces in the world. I have to remind myself that I'll forget that extra money long before I forget sitting there with someone I love watching St. Mark's Square come alive after dark. Sometimes the cheaper drink with a view of an alleyway is the smart choice. But once in a while, stop maximizing value, order something you can afford, and enjoy the famous view. Because sometimes the view is what you're really buying. So those were 7 Europe travel rules that I think are worth breaking at least some of the time. I know many of you are experienced Europe travelers yourselves, so I'd love to hear which common travel advice you sometimes ignore. I'll link my video ranking Europe's most famous day trips below, and if you enjoyed this one, I'd really appreciate a like, or subscribe for more videos about Europe and other great destinations. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, and remember, the best trip isn't the one where you follow every rule, it's the one you'll still remember years later.